I work night shifts at a distribution warehouse about 45 minutes outside of the city, so driving home at 3 in the morning on an empty highway is just kind of my normal life at this point. You get used to it mostly, but there are certain stretches of road that never quite feel comfortable no matter how many times you drive them. There's this one particular stretch on Route 30 that's about 12 miles of nothing, no exits and buildings, just the road and woods on both sides. This was a Tuesday night in late October. I remember it being Tuesday because I had just picked up an extra shift and I was exhausted, probably more tired than I should have been to be driving honestly. I was about 4 miles into that stretch when my headlights caught something on the shoulder up ahead. As I got closer, I could see it was a man standing on the side of the road, just standing there facing the road. I drove past him. I watched him in my mirror as I did. He didn't wavel, just watched my car go by with his hands at his sides. It bothered me enough that I actually took my foot off the gas a little. Something about the way he was just standing there so still felt wrong, but I kept going. About a mile up the road I started feeling guilty. It was cold that night, probably mid-40s, and the guy didn't look like he was dressed for it from what I could tell. And there was nothing out there, no houses, no other roads. I started thinking, what if his car broke down further back and he walked up this way looking for help? So I pulled over and waited. I figured if he was just a normal guy in a bad situation, he'd eventually walk up to my car. I kept my eyes on the mirror. After about 2 minutes, I could see him in the distance walking toward me, so I just stayed put with my hazards on. He got to my passenger window, and I rolled it down about halfway. He was a white guy, maybe late 30s, medium build, dark jacket. He had this very flat expression on his face, not relieved, not grateful, just flat. He asked if I could give him a ride to the next exit. I said sure and told him to get in. He got in and closed the door and I pulled back onto the highway. He smelled like cigarettes and something else I couldn't quite place. He didn't say thank you. Didn't say anything actually. Just sat there. I asked him what happened and he said his car broke down a ways back. I asked if he needed to use my phone to call someone and he said he was fine. We drove in silence for a few minutes. Then he said, "Just pull over here." I looked around. We were still in the middle of that stretch. No exit, no lights, nothing. I told him we weren't at the exit yet, and he said, "This is fine. Just pull over here." Something shifted in my gut. I told him it was another couple miles and I'd get him to the exit where at least there'd be a gas station. He didn't respond to that. I glanced over at him and he was just staring straight ahead through the windshield. His jaw was tight. His hands were flat on his knees. I gripped the wheel a little tighter and kept driving. Then he said it again, slower this time. "Pull over." I told him I'd get him to the exit and that was it. My voice came out steadier than I felt. He turned and looked at me then, just looked at me for a long few seconds without saying a word. Then he faced forward again. I pushed it up to about 80. I've never driven that stretch that fast in my life. I could see the lights of the exit ramp coming up and I took it fast, probably too fast, and pulled into the gas station on the corner and stopped the car. I told him here we were. He sat there for a second without moving. Then he opened the door and got out. He didn't say anything. He just walked around the side of the gas station building and was gone. I locked my doors and sat there for a minute, just trying to get my breathing under control. Then I noticed it. He hadn't come from the back seat. He'd been sitting right next to me in the passenger seat the whole time, right next to me in a car with no other person around for miles. And I had never once thought to ask him why he was just standing in the middle of nowhere on the side of a dark highway at 3 in the morning without a car anywhere near him. I called my buddy when I got home and told him the whole thing. He didn't say much for a second, and then he just said, "Man, you're lucky you didn't pull over." And I think about that a lot. My sister and I drove down to visit our parents for the holidays last year. They live about 6 hours away from us, so we always just make a day of it, leave early, stop somewhere for food, and usually get there by late afternoon. But this time we stayed longer than we planned. My dad wanted to watch the game and one thing led to another, and before we knew it, it was past midnight, and we still had a 6-hour drive ahead of us. My sister offered to drive the first half, and I'd take over somewhere around the halfway point. That was the plan. She drives slow, always has. Never goes more than 5 over the limit, which drives me insane, but on a dark, empty highway. At 1 in the morning, I wasn't really complaining. We were somewhere in Kentucky, I don't remember exactly where, when she tapped my arm and told me to look. There was a dog sitting on the shoulder of the highway, not wandering, not sniffing around, just sitting there on the white line facing the road. It was a big dog, looked like some kind of German Shepherd mix, just sitting there perfectly still watching the cars go by. My sister is an animal person, so naturally she wanted to stop. I told her we were on a highway and there was nothing we could do. She said she wasn't going to just leave a dog on the side of a highway in the middle of the night. We went back and forth for about half a mile, and then she just put her blinker on and pulled over. I told her this was a bad idea. She said it would take 2 minutes and got out of the car before I could say anything else. I sat in the passenger seat watching her in the side mirror as she walked back toward the dog. The dog stood up when she got close to it but didn't run. She crouched down and let it sniff her hand. Then she looked back at me and gave me the thumbs up like everything was fine. I shook my head and looked back at my phone. A few minutes went by and I looked in the mirror again. I could see my sister still crouched down near the dog, but now there was somebody standing near her. I sat up straight and looked harder. It was a man. He was just standing there near her. I couldn't tell how close exactly. The mirror wasn't giving me enough detail, and we were maybe 200 feet back from where she was. I got out of the car. I started walking toward her, and I called out her name. She stood up and looked at me, and then looked at the man next to her and said something to him. As I got closer, I could see he was a heavy-set older guy, maybe 60, wearing a flannel shirt. He had his hands in his pockets. He was looking at me as I walked over. My sister said to me, "This is his dog. He lives just through those trees." I looked at where she was pointing. Through the tree line off the shoulder, there was a faint light in the distance that I guessed was a house. The man looked at me and nodded slowly. He didn't smile, didn't say anything, just nodded. I asked him what the dog was doing out here on the highway, and he said it got loose sometimes. Something about his voice was strange, very calm, almost too calm for a guy who supposedly just found his dog on the side of a highway. My sister handed him the dog's collar that she had apparently been holding, and he took it without looking at her. I told my sister we should get going, and she agreed and said goodbye to the man. He didn't say goodbye back. He just turned and started walking toward the tree line with the dog. We walked back to the car and got in, and I told her that was weird. She agreed that the guy was a little odd, but said she was glad the dog was okay. We sat there for a second, and I looked in the mirror one more time. The man had stopped walking. He was just standing at the edge of the tree line, not going through it, just standing there looking in the direction of our car. I told her to drive. She pulled back onto the highway, and I kept watching the mirror until the darkness swallowed him up. Neither of us talked about it for a while. Then my sister said, "How did he get there so fast?" I asked her what she meant. She said when she first saw him, he just kind of appeared next to her. She hadn't heard any footsteps, hadn't seen him come from the tree line or from the road. He was just suddenly standing there beside her. I didn't have an answer for that. We drove the rest of the way home with every door locked and barely said a word to each other. The thing that still bothers me the most is not the man appearing out of nowhere, it's the dog. Because if that was actually his dog and it got loose sometimes, why was it just sitting there on the shoulder of a highway completely calm, like it had been trained to sit in exactly that spot and wait, like it was trained to make someone stop? This happened the summer I turned 27. I was driving back from a camping trip alone, something I had done plenty of times before, so I wasn't nervous about it. Packed up my tent early Sunday morning and hit the road around noon, figuring I'd be home well before dark. I wasn't. I took a wrong turn somewhere around hour 3 and my GPS kept rerouting me through back roads I had never been on. It was one of those situations where you keep thinking the right road is just a few miles ahead, and before you know it, you've added 2 hours to your journey and the sun is already starting to sink. By the time I reached the stretch they locally call the Green Mile, which is basically a 20-mile corridor of dense forest highway cutting through state land with no houses, no exits, no cell service, and no lighting of any kind. It was already past 9 at night. I had driven through forested highways before, but nothing quite like this one. The trees on both sides were enormous and old, their branches growing so far out over the road that the headlights only illuminated a narrow tunnel of asphalt ahead. Everything beyond that was pure black, the kind of darkness that feels dense and solid, like it has weight to it. I turned the radio up slightly and kept my speed steady. About 6 miles in, I passed a wooden sign on the side of the road. It was weathered and old, and I only caught it for a second in my peripheral vision, but it looked like it said something about logging roads ahead. I didn't think much of it. Then my headlights caught something in the road. I braked hard and came to a stop, maybe 15 feet from it. It was a deer, a large one, just standing completely still in the middle of the road, staring into my headlights. Not an unusual thing on a forest highway. I waited for it to move. It didn't. I waited a full 2 minutes. It just stood there staring at my headlights without moving a muscle. Not even its ears were moving. Deer are usually twitchy, alert, one sound away from bolting. This one just stood there like a statue. I tapped my horn lightly. Nothing. I tapped it again, longer this time. The deer just kept staring. I crept the car forward slowly, thinking that would spook it. As I got closer, I noticed something that made me ease off the gas completely. The deer's legs were shaking, not the casual shifting weight of an animal at rest, a deep, visible trembling like it was terrified of something. Its eyes were wide and glassy and locked on my headlights, but I got the distinct feeling it wasn't actually looking at my headlights at all. It was looking past them, at whatever was behind me. The back of my neck went cold. I looked in my rearview mirror. Complete darkness. I couldn't see anything. The road behind me had just disappeared into black. I looked back at the deer. Then from the tree line on the left side of the road came a sound that I have spent 3 years trying to find a rational explanation for, and I still haven't managed it. It was deep and resonant, almost like a very low hum, but rhythmic. Like breathing. Slow and heavy and massive. The kind of sound that you don't just hear, but actually feel in your chest cavity. The deer bolted. Not across the road, not into the opposite tree line. It ran directly away from me down the center of the road ahead and disappeared into the darkness. I sat there with my foot on the brake and my heart hammering. The sound came again from the tree line. Closer this time. I want to be clear that I am not somebody who believes in monsters or creatures or anything like that. I grew up hunting with my father. I know what bears sound like. I know what elk sound like. I know the sounds a forest makes at night, and none of them sound like what I was hearing. This was something with size and weight and slow, deliberate breath, and it was close enough to my car that I could hear it over my running engine. Then something hit the back of my car. Not a tap. A solid, heavy impact that rocked the entire vehicle and sent my heart straight into my throat. I screamed out loud, which I am not ashamed to admit. I floored it. I don't know how fast I was going down that road. Fast enough that the trees on both sides blurred into walls. I was gripping the wheel so hard my knuckles ached, and I did not lift my foot from that pedal for what felt like forever until the trees began to thin, and a faint glow appeared in the distance that turned into a gas station, sitting alone at a crossroads. I pulled in and sat under the lights, breathing hard for several minutes before I could even think straight. I got out on shaking legs and walked around to the back of my car. There was a dent in the rear bumper, large, deep, roughly rounded. Not the kind of dent you get from another car or from a falling branch. Something with enormous force had struck the back of my car with what I can only describe as intent. I filled my tank up and I left, and I drove home with every light in that car blazing. I've looked up that road since then. There is nothing in any local news or record about incidents on that stretch. No animal attacks, no reported sightings, nothing official at all. But in an online forum for that region, I found a thread from about 5 years ago where somebody described driving through the same corridor at night and hearing a sound they described as enormous rhythmic breathing from the tree line. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe. I'll see you in the next video.